Crestfall Tech Tower woke before the sun, its glass walls catching the faintest morning glow long before the city beneath it began to stir, and amid the hum of generators and the soft sigh of automatic doors unlocking for another day of ambition, ego, and competition, Jonah Reed arrived with a worn duffel bag over his shoulder, and a mop handle balanced against his arm, a quiet ghost in a place that worshipped noise and titles, but this suited him perfectly, because nothing hid wealth better than a uniform stained by bleach, and a nametag that read Janitor in letters so plain they dissolved in people's thoughts as soon as they glanced at them. Jonah had learned this months ago when he first slipped into the role, leaving behind private jets, high-rise penthouses, and board meetings so heated they could scorch steel, all to walk among people who believed themselves above him, unaware that the same man who wiped dust from their desks had built the company they bragged about on their RA-some-As. He moved through the lobby as security guards nodded without truly seeing him, and executives rushed past, without acknowledging the human being holding the door as they squeezed through like royalty, and Jonah let them, because every rude shove, every dismissive command, every insult muttered under breath was data, insight, judgment, not of him, but of them, and he had come here to judge quietly enough that even the building itself had forgotten he was anything but the man with the bucket. Jonah pushed his cart toward the elevators, listening to the echoing click of expensive heels, and the rustle of tailored suits, and though his posture showed nothing of discomfort, his mind wandered to the notebook, hidden in the pouch of his cart, pages filled with ideas, diagrams, product expansions, and philanthropic blueprints, a map of the next 10 years of Crestfall Tech that no one else had seen, all waiting for the day he revealed himself, but not yet, because the real purpose of his undercover life had nothing to do with business, and everything to do with something he was terrified to admit out loud. He was searching for people he could trust, people with integrity, people who treated others like equals without knowing who they were in the world, and maybe, just maybe, he was searching for one person who saw him, not his money. His mother's voice lingered in his thoughts, the way perfume lingers in a memory. Jonah, the person who deserves your heart won't care about your empire, they'll care about your soul. And so, in this skyscraper full of ivy, Ligue sumes, hollow compliments, and power-hungry masks, Jonah swept floors and emptied trash cans, watching, listening, waiting. The building slowly filled, departments blinking awake one by one, marketing caffeinating itself, engineering locking into code, management preparing spreadsheets designed to impress, but Jonah felt strangely calm, as though the mop in his hand grounded him more than any corporate title ever had. He passed employees squabbling about bonuses, interns terrified of making mistakes, and directors bragging about ruthless tactics that landed them promotions, and with every sneer thrown toward him, Jonah Reed character like a book. A group of analysts walked by discussing their weekend plans, and one of them, Jason Hale, the kind who believed polished shoes reflected worth, deliberately accidentally bumped Jonah's bucket, splashing water across the marble floor. Jason laughed, tossed a "watch where you push that thing," and strutted away, never noticing Jonah's eyes tracking him with cool indifference that hid the fact that Jason's fate at the company had already been sealed, not because Jonah was angry, but because disrespect was the one currency Jonah refused to invest in. He knelt silently and wiped up the spill while employees stepped around him like a stain on the building, and he remembered how once, in a boardroom, those same people would have bent words and morals to impress him, yet here, trying to earn favor from someone they didn't know was him, they exposed themselves completely. Hours passed, filled with clattering keyboards and rising voices as pressure mounted in meeting rooms, and Jonah continued his rounds, all routine until the elevator dinged, and a woman he'd never seen before stepped out holding a laptop like a lifeline, her brown hair caught in a messy clip that told him she didn't care about looking perfect, she cared about showing up, which already made her unusual in this place. She nearly collided with Jonah and froze, eyes wide with panic. Then she broke into a warm human smile, the kind Jonah hadn't seen in months, and said, "Oh gosh, I'm so sorry, you okay?" in a tone that acknowledged he existed fully, not as a tool or obstacle, but as a person. Jonah blinked, almost startled. He nodded slowly, his voice caught behind the shock of being spoken to kindly, and she introduced herself as Emma Carter, first week in marketing, clearly nervous but pushing through it. She thanked him, for what, Jonah didn't even know, and ran toward her department, leaving Jonah watching her go with a strange, hopeful tug in his chest, not knowing that one small smile had already altered the entire course of his undercover mission. And so began a day that felt different, because for the first time in months of invisibility and mockery, Jonah felt like someone had truly seen him, and the realization was as disarming as it was dangerous. Emma Carter had imagined corporate life 1,000 ways, exciting, terrifying, full of opportunity, and on her second week at Crestfall Tech, she realized it was all those things at once, only sharper at the edges, like walking barefoot on glass where each step mattered too much and everyone watched to see who stumbled first, because mistakes here equaled weakness and weakness equaled replacement. Still, Emma pushed herself through the revolving doors every morning with a deep breath, and whispered courage, believing that if she worked hard enough, learned fast enough, and made herself indispensable, life would finally stop feeling like a race she was losing. She had grown up in a world far away from chrome elevators and high-rise office views, small-town Kansas, where her mother worked 2 jobs and still made time to check Emma's homework, where the nicest restaurant served burgers and milkshakes, and where kindness wasn't currency, it was a habit. But nothing could prepare her for Crestfall Tech's ecosystem of ambition, where smiles were tight masks and friendship was a luxury few could afford. Yet, Emma didn't know how to blend in by staying silent. She asked questions others were afraid to ask, thanked people who loaned her a pen, and said good morning like she meant it, even when coworkers stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. The tension in the office was something she felt long before she understood it. The way junior staff avoided senior staff, the way managers spoke downward without ever looking into someone's eyes, and the way everyone, absolutely everyone, ignored the janitor who worked quietly through the halls like a shadow that cleaned up after the storms people created. Emma noticed him from her very first day, the tall man with gentle movements and eyes that looked too wise for the job he held, and though she didn't know why, she felt something twist in her chest whenever she saw him, not pity, but recognition, like life had thrown him into a place that didn't deserve him. While others treated him like background noise, Emma found herself wanting to talk to him, ask him his name, ask him his story, because her mother had taught her that the world splits into 2 kinds of people, those who look away from quiet suffering, and those who lean in to help, and Emma refused to be the former. Her desk sat near a window overlooking the city, but she rarely had time to appreciate the view because her workload doubled every day, drafting social campaigns, building pitch decks, editing emails, rewriting slogans at the direction of a supervisor who always found something wrong, and while she stayed late to finish everything, her colleagues slipped out early or dumped their tasks onto interns without shame. Emma learned quickly that half the team built their success on the backs of others, but she refused to join them, determined to grow without stepping on anyone's hands. She worked after hours until her eyes blurred, and it was during one of those lonely nights, when she first heard the quiet hum of a vacuum rolling down the hallway, and saw the janitor, Jonah, whom everyone else never acknowledged, not just passing by, but pausing at her cubicle like he wasn't sure if he should interrupt. She looked up expecting a manager, but when she saw him, her tiredness cracked under a genuine smile. He asked in a soft voice if he could empty her trash can, and Emma laughed, almost startled, saying she never even noticed cleaning happened, because she was always buried in work, and Jonah simply nodded, murmured that she worked harder than most people here, which made Emma blink in surprise, because no one else had noticed or cared enough to say so. That tiny sentence felt like a metal pinned to her chest. Over the next few days, Emma found herself saying hello to him every morning, sometimes offering a small wave, and Jonah responded with a slight smile that seemed like it came from far away. Like he wasn't used to being acknowledged, but appreciated it more than he let on. Little by little, she learned to see the hidden rhythms of the building, the receptionist who held tears behind mascara, because her boss yelled daily, the intern who ate lunch alone on the stairs, because he was too intimidated to sit with anyone, and the janitor who cleaned up after expensive people who never looked him in the eye. Emma's kindness didn't go unnoticed, not by her coworkers, who saw it as weakness, nor by Jonah, who saw it as rare strength. By the end of week 2, whispers began spreading, soft, poisonous rumors that Emma was too friendly, too naive, that she wouldn't last, because in Crestfall's unspoken rulebook, kindness made you expendable, ruthlessness made you valuable. But Emma had lived her whole life proving people wrong. She wrote in her journal every night about the world she wanted to build, where children who dreamed big didn't get crushed by life's weight before they even started, where success didn't require stepping on others, and where people like Jonah could walk into a room and be treated like someone who mattered. She didn't know yet that the man she defended in the cafeteria, the one she greeted every morning with warmth others couldn't spare, was a billionaire who had the power to make every one of her dreams come true. For now, Emma simply carried her coffee, her laptop, and her stubborn belief that kindness would eventually win, Unaware she was already changing the trajectory of Crestfall Tech, and altering the life of the quiet janitor, who was watching her far more closely than she realized. Emma's third week arrived with the sharp snap of cold rain outside, and the even sharper switch in office temperature. People who'd ignored her before now seemed to watch her a little too closely, not with friendliness, but with the same suspicion that cats reserve for strangers. She felt it when she walked into the marketing bullpen and conversations suddenly shifted to whispers, when her supervisor narrowed her eyes as though Emma's good nature was a secret plan to overthrow the company, and when co-workers rolled their eyes every time she brought an idea to the table. Yet none of those cold shoulders fazed her as much as the moment she noticed Jonah wiping a smudge from a conference room glass wall while two executives stood beside him joking loudly about how even a monkey could mop floors, their laughter bouncing like nails against steel until Jonah stiffened almost imperceptibly, a tiny reaction most people would miss, but not Emma, because she had always been hypersensitive to pain, especially the kind people hid. That morning, she returned to her desk but couldn't focus on her campaign copy, her anger rising like heat through her ribs as she wondered what kind of world accepted cruelty as humor. Still, she forced herself to breathe, her fingers tapping out slogans that no longer inspired her. Innovation for humanity. Words that felt too ironic for a company comfortable with disrespect. At noon she took her lunch alone in the tiny break room overlooking the parking garage, where she often saw Jonah pushing his cart outside to empty bags into the dumpster. She thought about joining him, just to say hello, but she hesitated, afraid he might think she was pitying him, which she absolutely wasn't. Emma was drawn to truth, and something about Jonah radiated truth beneath his silence. Instead, fate made the choice for her when the elevator dinged and Jonah entered the break room, holding a broom. He'd clearly brought only to tidy up the floor corner, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of someone sitting there. Because most employees ate in the fancy cafeteria or huddled in conference rooms trying to look important, Emma waved shyly and motioned for him to join her, and after a moment's hesitation, he leaned his broom against the wall and sat in the chair farthest from hers, as though unsure he had permission to occupy space. They ate quietly at first, Emma with her homemade sandwich, Jonah with a simple apple, and though the silence wasn't comfortable at the start, it gradually softened into something unspoken and mutual. The kind of silence that doesn't need filling. Finally Emma asked his name, pretending she didn't already memorize his namtag. Jonah, he said softly, and the name felt too big for the role he played, like a king wearing a paper crown. She wanted to ask everything, where he was from, what he dreamed of, what he did before, but experience taught her that sometimes the best way to learn someone was to let them reveal themselves slowly. When she told him her name, Jonah nodded in recognition. He had noticed her too, more than she realized. He said she seemed different from everyone else, but before either could say more, the break room door swung open and a trio of co-workers entered, loud, entitled, eager to dominate the air, and as soon as they saw Emma sitting with the janitor, their eyes widened, smirks forming like bruises. One whispered loudly enough for Jonah to hear, "Wes, she knows where she belongs." And another laughed cruelly, before tossing a crumpled wrapper on the floor, as if to test whether Jonah would immediately get up to clean it. Jonah did, quietly, but Emma's blood boiled. She scooped up the wrapper, and threw it into the trash herself, shooting them a glare sharper than glass, though she said nothing, because she was still the new girl, and couldn't afford a confrontation. Yet the moment she returned to her seat, Jonah shot her a tiny grateful glance that lit her nerves like electricity. After they left, Emma finally exhaled, apologizing on behalf of the universe, for people who didn't know better. But Jonah shrugged it off with the wary grace of someone who had lived a lifetime being underestimated. He surprised her then by saying, "People show you who they are when they think they're above you. It's useful." Emma tilted her head, puzzled by the depth of the statement, and for the first time she felt the faintest edge of mystery around him, like a locked door behind a painted wall. When their break ended, Emma returned to her desk with her heart heavier than before, but her resolve stronger. She decided then and there that she would make Crestfall better, not with force, but with presence, persistence, and patience, because somewhere deep inside she sensed that people like Jonah deserved to be seen and defended, even when the whole world chose to look away. She didn't know it yet, but Jonah walked away from that lunch feeling something he hadn't felt in years, hope that maybe, buried among all the selfish climbers in this tower, he had found one person whose character shone brighter than ambition. By the end of that week, Emma had developed a radar for cruelty, not because she wanted to, but because Crestfall Tech forced it upon her like homework she didn't sign up for, she began to notice how people treated the lowest, ranked employees, from receptionists to cafeteria workers, and especially Jonah, who seemed to move through the building like a test no one knew they were taking. One morning, she walked into the office pantry for coffee, and found Jonah quietly wiping down the counters, when a senior manager, Ms. Linton, strutted in wearing heels sharp enough to pierce concrete, and an attitude even sharper. Without glancing Jonah's way, she set her empty coffee mug on the counter, and snapped her fingers at him like she was calling a dog. "Make yourself useful," she ordered, as though Jonah existed to orbit her. Emma's jaw clenched so tightly she tasted metal, but she took a deep breath and watched in disbelief as Jonah calmly rinsed the mug, filled it with fresh coffee, and handed it back, only for Ms. Linton to take one sip, wrinkle her nose, and pour it straight into the sink with a dramatic groan, blaming Jonah for not knowing how to follow the simplest instructions. That was the breaking point. Emma stepped forward before Jonah could even move, saying in a steady voice she barely recognized as her own, "There's nothing wrong with the coffee, it tastes fine." Ms. Linton turned, stunned that someone dared speak, and sneered at Emma like she was lint needing removal. "Did I ask you?" she barked, and Emma responded without hesitation, "No, but you're being cruel for no reason. He's doing his job." The temperature in the room dropped 4 degrees. Jonah stood frozen, eyes wide. Ms. Linton leaned close, her whisper a venomous threat. "You'll learn your place here. Don't defend the help if you want to stay employed." Emma wanted to scream that respect wasn't optional and that no job was worth sacrificing humanity, but she forced her lips shut because she needed her paycheck and couldn't afford impulsive heroics. Still, she didn't back down, not in spirit. She held eye contact until Ms. Linton scoffed and stomped out, muttering about ungrateful children. When the door clicked closed, Jonah let out a breath slow enough to carry years of disappointment, but Emma noticed something new in his eyes, something warm, grateful, almost fragile, like no one had stood up for him in longer than she could imagine. "You didn't have to do that," Jonah murmured. Emma shrugged. "Maybe not. But someone should." Jonah nodded, silent, absorbing the moment. Little did Emma know, he replayed that scene in his mind 100 times later, studying the sincerity in her voice the way someone studies handwriting in a love letter. But defending Jonah officially marked Emma with invisible paint. From that moment on, some colleagues avoided her, others openly mocked her choices, and a few treated her like a reckless activist who would eventually burn out. At team meetings, whispers grew like mold. "She thinks she's better than us. She's a charity case waiting to happen. Why waste energy on people beneath us?" Attitudes that made Emma simultaneously furious and heartbroken. She learned what silence really meant, not peace, but permission. Permission for cruelty to spread. Permission for hierarchy to define humanity. Permission for a building full of brilliant minds to act small. Yet every time she saw Jonah sweeping at dusk, his shoulders a little straighter than before, Emma felt her resolve anchor deeper. If she couldn't change the world yet, she could change 1 square foot of floor at a time simply by respecting the person cleaning it. One evening, as she packed up to go home, she spotted Jonah outside the main entrance in the rain, holding his uniform jacket over a new custodian's head to shield them, while they tried to find the bus stop. Emma watched from the doorway, and realized something she couldn't shake. Jonah treated people the way she wished the world treated everyone, with quiet dignity and decency. And she finally understood why she liked him, not out of sympathy, but admiration. That night she wrote in her journal, "There are 2 kinds of power, the kind that